Repackaging best practices. In this presentation, we'll cover a number of repackaging best practices, including what should not be repackaged, using a clean machine, exiting any running applications, packaging from a network location, rebooting following installation, launching the application, and removing unnecessary user values. Starting off, what should not be repackaged? You've heard over and over again not to repackage vendor-provided MSIs or any MSI that already exists. Any change you need to make to an MSI can be done through a transform. Sometimes it's more difficult than other times to get what you want done, but repackaging an MSI is not only against Microsoft best practices, but if you make changes to an MSI, vendors will no longer provide support for that. And if you repackage an MSI, the component codes within the MSI package are not retained and are instead assigned random new GUIDs which won't correlate to any other MSIs provided by the vendor. For the very least, this means that patches and upgrades are not going to work, and you'll be forced to continue a bad practice in support of what you've done. Additionally, many repackaging tools exclude MSI-specific data from the registry by default, which again would result in an incomplete package. Operating systems, that's an obvious one. Operating system service packs, maybe not as obvious. If you look, an MSI is now distributed along with Windows XP and later service packs, but it is actually in a wrapper MSI, not a real MSI. It's just there to allow you to deploy it through group policy. It's helpful, and usually if you're trying to repackage something like a service pack, that's probably what you're shooting for anyway, because why else would you do something like that? But the bottom line is you can't repackage operating system service packs or hotfixes because they all contain low-level changes to the system that Windows won't permit, namely Windows protected files. MSI cannot update a Windows protected file, and a Windows protected file is any of the files installed by the Windows operating system itself during installation or the installation of a service pack. Those files are all protected and can only be updated by Microsoft's own internal processes. We also have Internet Explorer, which again is one of those things that updates a lot of Windows protected files on the system. And believe it or not, Media Player is another one of those packages that installs things on the system that can't be installed by anyone else but Microsoft due to the nature of Windows protected files. That's why Microsoft themselves don't provide these as Windows installer packages. It just can't be done that way. And finally, the Windows installer service itself, there's command line installation options to install this. If you pick it apart, it'll look like Windows installer service is an MSI itself, and it is, but it's not one that follows any of its own rules. So you need to deploy this via command line switches. A clean machine. You hear a lot that it's important to use a clean machine in order to ensure you capture all changes made to the installation. This is certainly the case, but what exactly is a clean machine? It can't just be the operating system, because your applications may not even run on the operating system alone. A clean machine is a computer that only has the operating system, the latest service pack deployed in your environment, desired version of MDEC deployed in your environment. Same goes for Internet Explorer and Media Player, as we discussed before, simply because other applications can make use of this and can't be repackaged. So these combined base system components and no additional applications constitute a clean machine. These are things that are definitely on all of the systems in your environment, and therefore you don't have to worry about a DLL or a shared component being included or not included on one system or another. These things that make up your baseline computer need to be consistent, but not just consistent, but consistent and only what's necessary. the more things that are on your computer, the less things the setup will need to change where it might have if it wasn't there. This might not seem like a problem if you have all of your systems have the same baseline and 20 applications. Why not just package on the system that has your baseline with those 20 applications? Eventually, some of those applications are going to come off, new ones will come on, maybe you'll move to a new operating system. Things are going to change, and not having those there ensures a more complete package, and therefore a package more resilient and likely to work on other operating systems, places you need to move it in the future. Exit any running applications. This may seem obvious. If you're repackaging a program, you know any changes that happen to the system during your before or after snapshot, or if you're using a process to monitor your changes, any changes that are made are going to be captured. So the less activity on your system, the better, and the less you'll have to clean up after the fact. Some things you may not consider are antivirus software, software firewalls like on XP, SP2, and later, even Windows Update. If a new update becomes available, it may start downloading in the background, and now you've got this in your package. And when you're cleaning up, you may see some of the things like the downloaded binary and remove that from your package, but it's a little harder to find things like where it recorded in the registry that it did download it, in which case that scenario might end up with machines that think they have something that they don't, or they think they've downloaded or are ready to install something that they don't really have. So you can see how just not getting yourself in that situation can save you some trouble. Verifying that things are, what's running on your system. If you look down your system tray, you should see the volume, maybe network connectivity, but there shouldn't be a bunch of icons down there for your antivirus or your desktop management client agent or any other application. A lot of things put themselves down there when they're running so you can access them and be aware of the fact that they're running. Some applications are a little more harder to find. You can look in the startup folder and program files. You can look in the registry under the run keys, and I've actually discovered this tool at sysinternals called auto runs. The link for it is here. If you go to sysinternals and go to their freeware utilities, you'll find this thing, and it's very helpful in showing you all the things that start up on your system when you launch it. It looks, in your logon script, it looks in the registry, it looks in startup, it looks in local system, run once. It checks everything, and it shows you and lets you remove all of these things in a pretty intuitive fashion. So just to be sure, if you're performing your repackaging on a clean system as recommended earlier, this is going to be far less of a problem. But if you've decided not to follow that advice, pay close attention to this, because it's the little things that'll catch you down the road. Repackaging from a network location is something you want to take advantage of if your repackaging software supports it. Most do. Most repackaging software is configured to ignore its own files and output by default. However, you want to ensure your machine is completely clean. So run the repackager remotely over the network from a mapped drive or a UNC share if it'll allow it, and store your output files on the network drive as well. Another risk in installing your repackaging software on your clean machine is that if your repackager installs some shared files not included in your baseline configuration, you've just damaged or dirtied your clean machine, and that's obviously counterproductive to a successful package. ensure your packages are clean. Don't rely on your exclusion lists alone. They can mistakenly include items that either you need or that you or an other person on your team inadvertently excluded. And if you exclude globally, the terminology is different with different repackaging products, but there's often an option to exclude it and add it to your exclusion list when you're cleaning up an individual package. And while it may not apply to the package you're working on now, it could very well bite you later when it's automatically excluded and you wanted it. There's always an opportunity to view what's been excluded as well prior to building your package with almost every repackaging software, but it just adds another step of things for you to look at and find and remove. And an exclusion list can be a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing. So just watch out and make sure that you take a good look at the package and what's in there, removing the things that don't belong. Having things in there that don't belong can cause you problems from repetitive reinstallation of Windows installer activity popping up saying, repairing your app. It can cause you not to be able to uninstall the product. Windows installer errors can pop up when you try to uninstall and a file has been included that can't be uninstalled because it shouldn't have been there to begin with. As far as what to remove from the package, there's quite a number of things that don't belong, and most are obvious. Some things like merge module components, something like MDAC is a system that a lot of applications are dependent upon, and it's made up of a lot of different files. And if you include one of those files, you really need to include all of those files. You shouldn't probably include none of those files, as MDAC is something that should be managed and deployed separately. But if you were to include a piece of it, you need to include the whole thing, because having mixed matched versions of files that make up something as complex as MDAC can cause you unbelievable problems. Legacy uninstall references, you don't want people clicking on uninstall this shortcut and having it remove the application from the system. Windows installer is still going to think it's there, and its add remove programs listing will still be there, and there's a good chance that an installation trigger could reinstall the application, and the user's not going to be able to understand that one. Current user keys, they're often unnecessary. We'll discuss this later. Temporary files, if they're in there, they're going to cause you trouble. User-specific files or information, files managed by Windows File Protection. Again, Windows protected files cannot be included. If possible, you should have someone else take a look at your package for completeness. You may be an expert, but even if the other person doesn't have more experience than you, it's just good to have a fresh set of eyes, take a look at it and challenge, why is this included, or why did you remove this? If possible, and if you have it, you should take a look at Package Cleaner. Package Cleaner is a tool that will scan your MSI package for items known to cause problems, like we discussed, items that are part of MDAC, legacy uninstall references, current user keys, temporary files, all the things we discussed. Package Cleaner has a database of all these things, including every Windows protected file, and it will bring them all to your attention. And in many cases, it will provide what that file is, what it does, why you may not want to have it in your package, what might happen if you do leave it in your package, and even in some cases they have exclusions to the rule where maybe you do need to include it in these certain cases. So it doesn't, because there is no black and white, this belongs and this doesn't belong in the world of repackaging, it gives you the knowledge to make the decision on your own. So if you're a beginner especially, this is very helpful, but even if you've been doing it for a while and you don't have someone else to review your work, Package Cleaner in a few seconds will scan your package and show you the things that you may not want to include, then you can review those and decide on your own if these are things that do belong in this package for whatever reason, or go ahead and remove them. Always reboot following the installation of your package, or your application, I should say. Most applications will prompt you to restart the system when you're done if they need to be. Not all do. And in a lot of cases, files in use won't be overwritten, and those files will change when the system reboots, because during that time those files aren't in use, and if they're flagged to be replaced, they will be at that time. Also, it's not uncommon for, especially with legacy setups, for vendors to put run once values in the registry in order to register a DLL that they installed prior to the reboot. And in a lot of cases, that may not be possible if the person logging onto the system is a lockdown user. So in that case, you'd install the application and walk away. The user sits down and logs on, and they get an error or the application doesn't work because a DLL couldn't be registered. That's a manual situation. In a repackaging situation, you want to make sure you do everything and get it all in your package for that silent rollout. So a reboot is just good practice. It makes sure that everything's covered. And during the repackaging process, after your application's been installed, launch it. Many times applications perform operations on first launch that you're going to want in your package, like acknowledging license agreements, entering serial numbers. Sometimes product registration requests will pop up, and you may have the opportunity to say, never ask me again. So that's the type of thing you want in your package, so all the users don't have to answer it themselves. Default configuration requests, maybe default directories and things of this nature, are forcibly presented to the user on first launch. And if that information is universal to your environment, then including it in your package will save the users from having to answer these dialogues. Remove any unnecessary user values. That could be registry values or files even that aren't determined to be required by your package. Including these can often cause you some problems. For one thing, if there are current user values or user profile located files in your package, then the first time every user runs that package, Windows Installer is going to pop up and essentially repair the installation by putting those current user values or profile files in place, because they won't be there the first time the application is run by each user. At that point, it'll be in their profile and they won't see it again. But that is an annoyance to a lot of users, and if it's not necessary for you to include that type of thing, then you can avoid that annoyance to the users. Another thing is the reinstallation of an MSI that contains HKey current user settings. If it's application preferences or configuration that the user has access to modify, then if they modify it and subsequently the package is reinstalled, those current user keys could be overwritten, and therefore their own settings that they've changed could be reverted back to the default that you established in your package. If you do include current user values in your package or files, then it's best to place them in their own feature within the MSI, because repairs happen at the feature level. A lot of times repackaging software will take everything that you do and put it in one feature called complete. That's usually not a big deal, but when it comes to repair, that whole feature is going to be installed if any one of those key files and any component in that feature is missing. So in the case of your inclusion of HKey user values, a registry setting that's missing that your package is looking for will trigger the reinstallation of the entire installation for each user the first time they run it. Naturally, the bigger the installation, the more time this is going to take, bandwidth it's going to take, and the more annoying it's going to be. So if you take those current user elements and put them in their own feature, then it will be a quick operation and require less bandwidth and will be that much less annoying. Well, that concludes this video. There are obviously other best practices out there, and more will be established. So I'm not calling this a complete presentation. We'll call this a living presentation, and it'll be updated as other best practices are established. I've created a thread in the premium member forum, the address of which is right there, or just take a look. It'll be easy to find. If you have any update requests, suggestions as to things that can be included here, please respond to that thread, and I'll be happy to take it under advisement. Thank you.